All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm NoRhett Walls, chapter president for Crew Inland Empire, and this is Coffee Break with Crew Inland Empire. And today our guest is Greg Burns.
Good morning.
So, a Southern California native, Greg Burns is a senior vice president with Investment Property Exchange. With over 20 years of experience, he has assisted thousands of clients and tax advisors by providing proven and cutting-edge exchange solutions that help clients achieve their goals. He specializes in every type of exchange transaction and is able to provide nationwide services to his clients through the National IPX network. He is an expert in delayed, simultaneous, reverse, improvement, personal property, and multiple asset exchanges. Greg Burns is also a Ruby Visionary Partner for Crew Inland Empire this year, so we thank him very much for his support of our chapter. So welcome, Greg. We appreciate the fact that you're going to talk with us this morning, and thank you for your support for Crew. It's very important to us. So I hope you're well this morning.
Everybody's doing, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thank you. I need to update my bio. There's no more personal property exchanges. So that's an update we need to do.
Disclaimer at the bottom. Not everything is always perfect, right?
I can't swap everything.
So tell us a little bit about IPX. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Give us a basic definition of IPX.
So IPX is a qualified intermediary, accommodator, facilitator. We facilitate exchange transactions. We've been in the business for about 27 years. I'm going on my 21st year. It's my 21st year with the company. We're a nationwide company. We've got offices all across the country. We've got 3 offices in Southern California, and then offices in San Francisco, and then they kind of extend out from there. So we're a nationwide network of, qualified intermediary that help clients, complete exchanges.
How did you get started in this industry?
That's kind of a weird deal. So my father has always been in real estate, so I kind of had an affinity for real estate. And I kind of started, in the apartment industry. And then from there, I kind of worked with a buddy of mine who owned a hotel company, and he was out doing feasibility site studies. So we would, look at, properties where they would potentially build these hotels. And, you do these elaborate reports that would, come back with and say, okay, we think this is why you should build a property here. And so I was talking to him, and he said, you really are never going to be able to achieve what you want to achieve here with the company because we're family owned and run. My brothers work for the company. And so, you really should think about maybe branching out and doing something else. And so he actually got me an interview to go do title. And so I went in to interview for title, but the guy that actually got me to interview had shared an office with the people at that time. There was an exchange, Western American Exchange it was called. And I knew a little bit about exchanges because my stepfather had been doing them for quite some time. And so I was kind of talking to this guy prior to going in and talking to somebody else about an interview for title. And he was kind of, he said, wow, you kind of know a little bit about 1031. Nobody at that time really knew much about it. And so it seemed like a very unique opportunity. The guy that interviewed me was a really nice guy. He was an attorney. And so he hired me. And then he kind of took me under his wing. And I went back to my stepfather and said, hey, I got a job selling 1031s. And he's like, how do you sell 1031s? I'm like, I'm not really sure, but I guess I'll figure it out. So, and so through that, we just, he kind of developed me, and we went out and did a lot of speaking and educating. And that's kind of how we got started.
Tell us why you love what you do.
I like what I do because I can, there's a lot of gray area to 1031, and there's a lot of updates that are going on. And so it's an opportunity for me, to really help my customers. So I have an opportunity to get in there and, sometimes problem solve with them. I can't act as their tax advisor, but, we do have a lot of of experience dealing with this specific tax code. And so it really gives me an opportunity to work with my customers and, hopefully, give them an advantage, look for a solution that they may not have thought of, and be able to get a transaction done that they may not have thought that could get done. Looking for creative ways to get kind of around, blocks in the road. And so it's really been something that I've really enjoyed. I get awesome opportunity to work with people like you out in the field. And so it's really been a great experience, and I really have enjoyed it.
It sounds like you do love what you do. And I know that because I have worked with you for a number of years now, and you really do care about the 1031 and how people understand and what it works best for them always. So tell me 3 misconceptions, and I know these somewhat because we work together a lot, but 3 misconceptions about a 1031.
So misconceptions. I think that the toughest thing with exchanges is that people kind of get caught up in when you tell them, hey, you got to buy something that's equal or greater in value to what you sold. A lot of times they want to deduct the loan because they hear it's a net sales price. And so that's kind of a misnomer. Another thing, people think that they have to replace their loan. So if you sell a property, let's say for $1 million, and let's say you have $500,000 of equity, you have $500,000 of debt, people think that no matter what happens, in order for you to not pay any taxes, you have to acquire $500,000 of debt on the property that you're buying. And you can offset debt with cash. And so it's probably the biggest misnomer that exists in 1031. I was doing a seminar for a very big commercial real estate company one time. And I told them, you don't have to replace debt, you can offset it with cash. And one of the very senior sales managers was in that presentation, said, no. And I'm like, yeah, no. And I sent him part of the tax code that explained it. And he has probably been my customer for the last 15 or 20 years. So the other thing that comes up that's a little bit of a misnomer is, especially with attorneys, is that cooperation clause. So when you do a 1031, you're required to put a cooperation clause in the contract. It basically puts the buyer on notice that the seller of that property is doing an exchange. And a lot of people believe that that buyer has to cooperate with your seller's exchange. It's called a cooperation clause. But, and I've had attorneys who have argued over that issue ad nauseum, and they don't have to really cooperate. The only requirement is that I notify the buyer of that property that my seller is doing an exchange. And that could simply be, they don't have to sign the document. They don't have to cooperate with the exchange. 1031 is not a condition of sale. So, so they don't have to cooperate. So those are kind of a few that we've come across.
So why would you say someone should do a 1031? What is the number one reason why?
So interestingly enough, there are certainly times where I'm talking to a customer where it may make more sense for them just to cash out and pay their taxes. The reality of it is capital gains tax rates are very low historically right now. And so for some people who, for whatever reason, they may not, might not be a benefit to them to do an exchange, I'll just simply say, I think maybe you should just cash out. In fact, I had a client that did that yesterday. They were, kind of on the fence, going back and forth, and they really didn't want to own more real estate. They wanted to use the money to pay down some additional debt on the properties, some properties that they own, so they could get a better cash flow from those properties. And they were retiring, and so the cash flow was really important. And so for them, I just said, probably doesn't make sense for you to do an exchange. But really, an exchange is there for a myriad of reasons. You have people that want to buy some type of passive investment. We see a lot of money going from like apartment buildings into triple net lease investments, where people can become kind of passive owners and don't have to deal with the day-to-day management. We see people using 1031 for estate planning. There's currently, you currently get a step up in basis when somebody passes away. So it's a good estate planning tool. People use it to build wealth. They buy a property, they rehab it or get it fixed up, get, rents up or whatever it might be. sell that property, exchange it for another property that's, you know, a little bit bigger, and they kind of go from there. And you really, if you look at a lot of the clients that we have that do a fair number of exchanges, most of them started, you know, with like a 4-unit property, and today that's, you know, 50 units or something like that. They just kind of built up and built up. So it's really a way that you can kind of grow your portfolio without having to pay taxes on those funds. It would be really challenging, I think, as a commercial real estate agent, to go to a client and say, listen, I want you to sell your property. I want you to pay 30% in taxes on the profits from the sale, and then I want you to use that money and go buy another property. The problem is that, one, you get an increase in property taxes, right? So that's, and then you have the second part where you have to make up all those taxes that you just paid on the new property before you can even get back to break even. So it's a way that people can move money within, you know, the investment real estate community, you know, without penalty, and it keeps kind of the real estate economy moving.
So would you say that there's any one particular transaction type, or when you meet someone, who is your ultimate candidate for a 1031? I mean, do you think that it's geared more towards just certain investors or towards seniors, or anyone that is going to be selling a piece of property? Do you go after certain business types? How do you work that?
You know, I think you can't look at it from an age perspective, or I think you look at it maybe just as investor by investor. Some, you know, I have clients who are in their, you know, mid 80s who are still doing exchanges. In fact, a lot of them that are kind of in that 70 to 80 year range, a lot of them are in partnerships, and they are, you know, getting out of those partnerships and kind of going their separate ways, so that if something happens to them, you know, somewhere down the road, that their heirs are not going to have to deal with their partner, or their partner's not going to have to deal with their heirs. But your typical, you know, exchange client is somebody who is either in a mode of trying to build their wealth, or they're looking to reinvest and become kind of passive owners. And I think those are our two probably biggest customers. Although on the residential side, it's, you know, it's you know, any and everybody could be potential candidate for 1031. So anybody that owns investment property, you know, can potentially, you know, be a good candidate.
So there have been talks recently in government that they would be abolishing the 1031 exchange rules and regulations and take it away. How will this change our commercial real estate industry?
So yeah, yeah, Joe Biden, who looks like he may be our next president, has come out kind of against 1031, and the idea was he wanted to take money that he would, you know, people were using in this tax code, and he was going to use that money to pay for another program that he wanted to pay for. The problem that, and the thing that the government doesn't get, is that you can't use static scoring when you deal with 1031, right? So if I just look at it and say, okay, $20 million of taxes or $30 million of taxes were deferred last year from 1031. If I do away with that, if I do away with 1031 exchanges, then guess what? That's $30 million or $30 billion that I just, you know, have for my program. But really, that's not the way that it works, because the problem that you're going to find is that people aren't going to trade, right? So you're going to say, okay, well, guess what? I don't want to do, you know, I don't want to sell my property because 1031 doesn't exist. I'm not going to go pay my taxes and then go buy another property. That doesn't make any sense. So you're going to have a lot of refinancing of properties, and, you know, not a lot of sales. Well, with sales come revenue, right? So you, not only do you have less sales that are out there, you're going to have all this less revenue that comes with it, right? You're going to have, you know, real estate agents not getting paid. You're going to have escrow officers not getting paid. You're going to have title people, and I know that that's terrible, but title people that are not getting paid on title transactions. You're going to have inspectors that are not getting paid. And then a lot of times in a 1031, the buyer that's coming in to buy that property as part of an exchange, they're looking to like improve it. And so they're spending money with contractors, you know, and other types of industries to improve that property and make it better. So all of that revenue, and all of these people are paying ordinary income tax on that money, right? Not long-term capital gains taxes, which is really at a lower rate. So I think if you look, and we've done a couple studies and we're updating those studies right now, is that if you look at those studies, the reality of it is that it's not really a net positive. It's kind of like a net negative. So I think that at the end of the day, you probably don't get a positive result from it. Even if I think, that he does become president, because the Senate, I think, is stayed in Republican control, you're probably not going to do any significant sweeping legislation. So my guess would be that hopefully 1031 will be around for at least a couple more years.
Let's hope so. We really need that in our industry to continue forward. It is a great, great thing for a
Yeah.
lot of people. So it does
Yeah.
make sense. Will you share with us your most difficult 1031 exchange? Do you have one that stands out more than most? I know they're not 100% easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they all vary. I mean, there's, the challenges I think you start with are probably with partnership issues, getting people out of partnerships into, individual structures. That's part of, one of the things that we have to kind of deal with, that comes up quite a bit, especially in California. California has, the Franchise Tax Board has an appetite for kind of challenging these partnership transactions where they're, divesting themselves from the partnership into like a tenant in common structure, kind of moving forward as individuals. And then we do have transactions. So you have to have a qualified intermediary, exchange set up prior to escrow closing. We have had transactions where somebody has accidentally closed without getting their exchange set up. And then we've had to go in and unwind the entire transaction, put back everybody from where they started, and then reclose the transaction. Those are always exciting. They don't happen very often, but they do occasionally happen. So it really kind of depends on what you have going on. I think S corporations are very challenging to deal with when people want to go their separate ways, because it's really a tough thing to do. Because in an S corporation, you can only transfer your shares at fair market value. And so when you transfer your shares at fair market value, then the problem that you have is that now you've, created a taxable event. So I think the key to 1031 to not run into these types of issues is always advanced planning. Hire somebody who, can get you through the process, that will do some advanced planning, talk to you about, hey, we're selling this asset. What do you want to buy? What are we trying to accomplish by selling this asset? Not somebody that simply comes in and says, hey, I can get you $5 million for your property. Those people typically run into issues. The clients that go, I got $5 million, I got to sell it, right? I only paid $2 million for it. I got a $3 million gain, I got to sell it, right? And so they just sell the property and then they enter into an exchange. And then what they don't realize is that everything out there has also appreciated just like their property has. And so they call me and go, oh, everything out there is just so expensive right now. And I'm like, yeah, did you get a lot of money for the property you sold? They're like, well, yeah. I'm like, well, do you think everybody else out there is giving property away? It's not the way that it works, right? You're selling here, you're buying here. And so because of that, I think planning is very important. I think that anytime you're doing an exchange, advanced planning is key. I think that it's important that when you have that conversation, say, hey, your building's worth $5 million. And they say, well, I think, we'd like to sell it. The question becomes, what are you trying to accomplish by selling this asset? Are we trying to increase cash flow? Are we trying to, diversify? Are we trying to reduce management responsibilities? What are we trying to accomplish by selling this property? And then once you get a plan in place that you know that you can execute, then kind of move forward with it.
So Greg, obviously the best stage to bring you in on a transaction is in the beginning, when you're already talking with someone who's thinking about selling their property or thinking about buying something. They want to engage you first off, basically. And my question would be, when they do that, are the questions and the consults free? Is there any charge for that upfront information when they call you to, get started with something?
No, because we don't act as a tax advisor. So I'd like to say we give out tax information, not tax advice. Tax advice should come from their legal counsel. But it is good to get me involved in the front end of the deal, make sure that they don't have any questions. Typically that's, and you do have certainly seasoned investors who have done lots of exchanges over the years. You don't really need to get me involved with those folks early on in the transaction. But if you have a client that maybe hasn't done a lot of exchanges or hasn't done an exchange, then it's a great time to get me involved early in the transaction to say, listen, let's get Greg on the phone. He can answer any questions you have about the exchange process. The other thing that I like about doing that with the agent, because agents will always tell me, oh, I've got this client, they've got a lot of exchange questions, I'm just going to go ahead and give them your number. And that's great. But I think the important thing, the better thing to do is try to set up a conference call with me, the client, and the real estate agent that's referring them over to us to make sure, or it's a CPA, so that we're all on the same page, right? Because what happens is if I'm telling the client something, then maybe the agent isn't on the same page, or they don't understand 1031 as well. And so they start telling, oh, I didn't realize you can do that, or something other. And so we kind of get things lost in translation. So it's really important, even sometimes when I'm getting texts, which I don't really love, but when I'm getting text messages or emails, and it looks like maybe could be something lost in translation, I'll just tell the client, call me, let's get on the phone so that we can make sure that the answer that I'm giving you is the correct answer to the question that you're asking me. Because what I don't want to do is misinterpret someone's question, give them an answer, and then it's not the answer that they're really looking for, that they need. So I think it's really important to, it's very easy to do these days with all the technology that we have to get somebody on a conference call. I mean, we can do it from our cell phones now. So super easy to get done. And we do have a lot of people are starting to do Zoom meetings. So clients that maybe want to do face-to-face meetings are on Zoom meetings. We don't, the company has tried to ask me not to do a lot of face-to-face meetings, or really to honestly do any face-to-face meetings with our customers. And the reason is because I work in the office with the transaction coordinators, and if they get sick and go out, then we're in trouble. So we're trying to make sure that they stay healthy, because people say, oh, are you working from home? And I'm like, no, we're holding on to people's money so they don't let us go home. They keep us in the office because they want to make sure that the money's going in and out and getting to the places it needs to go.
So Greg, what are the costs for your services?
So we charge a flat fee. It's $850 to do just a standard delayed exchange. And that's from when you sell one property, that you buy one property. We also do reverse exchanges. Those start at about $6,500. So they're more expensive. And people say, oh, why are they so more expensive? Because they're a lot more work. We actually have to take title to a property. We have to create an LLC. There's triple net lease agreements that are in place. There's notes and deeds of trust. So there's a lot more involved in doing a reverse exchange, but they have become increasingly popular in this market. And the reason that reverses are more popular is because in a market where there's limited inventory, being able to buy what you want before you sell what you have is a big advantage. And if you have the cash to do that, you don't really risk ever paying taxes because you've already acquired this property. And so while they are more expensive types of transactions, we're seeing more and more people kind of do them because they don't want to worry about getting stuck, in a 1031, not being able to find the property that they want in the amount of time that the government gives them.
Very true. Thank you for your information and your time today. We really appreciate that. I want to share some fun facts about Greg, and then we will open it up for questions if anyone has any direct questions for Greg. So you have some interesting numbers that you sent me, which I find really interesting. So you have 4 kids, and I understand what well, one's still in high school and the rest are graduated. Is that correct?
So I have a 19-year-old, I have 2 18-year-olds, they're twins, and then I have a 10-year-old. So I've kind of run the gamut.
Wow.
So we have the old way. We have the oldest 10-year-old that we've ever come across, because she has to deal with her older brothers and sisters. So she's super tough. In fact, she just recently took up boxing. And so her sister is now a little bit nervous around her, but she is unbelievable kid. She is 10-year-old. She has like the vocabulary of like probably like a 30-year-old. She is unbelievable to talk to. So, and so even for me, like, you know, if I get into dispute with her, I've got to stay on my toes because if she will catch me slipping if I am, for sure.
We will send you some boxing gloves after this video, just so you know.
Yeah.
So you also have 4 dogs. So 4 kids and 4 dogs. Is that 1 dog per kid? How did that work out?
You know, I think my wife and I are a glutton for punishment. I don't know why that happened. You know, it's when we came together, you know, my wife and I, we kind of were a blended family. When we came together, I had 2 dogs and she had 1. And then we inherited a dog when her godmother passed away. And so we ended up with 4 dogs. And we just kind of dealt with it. And then, you know, a couple years ago, we had lost 3 of the dogs from old age. And I think we were down to 2 dogs. And then I don't know how we got back up to 4 dogs, but we're back up at 4 dogs. So yeah, it's always a little bit of chaos around my house.
And you also have 4 antique cars. So can you tell us makes, models, and years?
Yeah. So I've always been a big fan of old cars. My dad, even as in his childhood, he was you know, kind of a hot rod guy, and so so I have a 31 Ford Roadster. I have a 72 Chevy C10 truck. I have a 61 Impala, and I have a 68 Camaro. So I bought the Camaro, yeah, for my wife to drive, but she never drives it. So, but yeah, it's something that I really enjoy, and you know, I look at them as kind of rolling works of art that you get to drive and enjoy, and they've been a lot of fun, and they've been a lot of enjoyment, and we've bought some of the cars at the auction at Barrett-Jackson, which has been a lot of fun to go to. It's an interesting concept there. So they let you in, and as a bidder, they give you a drink tag for 10 free drinks a day. And I think that there's a method to that. They want you to get as many of those in you, as much liquid courage as you can in you, to go and start raising your hand. Yeah, so it's a dangerous place to be with alcohol in you, for sure.
Absolutely. I've been to Barrett-Jackson. I love that very much. It is a ton of fun to go to, and they do like to push the alcohol while you're there. Definitely.
Yeah.
So I will ask then, so do you do the restoration yourself, or is it anything, you know, do you send it out to the shop, or do you like to do the work yourself?
Some of the, like on my Roadster that I've owned that car probably for the longest that I've owned it. I did a lot of the work that myself, and then recently, about 6 months ago, I decided to redo the car, and my dad had built a motor for a Roadster that he was going to build, and then he passed away, and so I had this motor sitting around, and so I decided to transplant that motor into this Roadster that I have, and I'm actually not doing that work. It's being done by a shop out in Pomona. Some guys that you know, are very, very, a lot more talented than I am, are doing the work, and so I'm excited. It's actually just a couple doors down from me right now, getting painted, and so it's an exciting process. It's a long process. It's an expensive process to redo a car, but yes, it's definitely a labor of love. So I'm looking forward to getting that done, hopefully by the end of the year, and getting out and doing what I really like to do with the cars, which is drive them.
Exactly. Well, does anyone have any questions for Greg? You can put them in the chat box, or you can simply just speak up. And if not, we will let everyone get on with their day.
I have a question. This is Emily.
Well,
Hi,
we
Greg.
appreciate your time. Oh, Emily has a question. Go ahead, Emily.
Yes, of course. I'm always looking to, as you know, I'm in the under 5-year stage of my career, so I'm always looking to find new ways of how people, I guess, quote unquote, made it in their career. And it sounds, by the sounds of it, you have. So wanted to ask just kind of at what point, if at all, did you feel you reached a level of mastery, I guess, either whether it be in the exchange, on the exchange side of things, or on the side of just being able to go out and earn new clients' business, or kind of at what point in your career did you feel you reached that level of mastery, and then B, what do you do to I guess keep up with continuing to grow your client base, if at all?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of an ongoing process. Certainly, when I first started, I did a lot of seminars for a lot of small residential real estate offices. The attorney that I worked for, he would kind of do these 1 hour presentations. And then I would do like 5 minutes of it. Then I would do 10 minutes of it, and then 20 minutes of it. And then eventually I got to do it on my own. And then I remember one day I was in the South Bay doing a seminar for a real estate office. And I saw him in the back of the office falling asleep. And then I knew, okay, I'd gotten it covered. And then you kind of graduate up and you start doing seminars for commercial brokers, which, tend to be a little bit tougher. People are a little more anxious about doing those types of presentations just because, commercial brokers, I knew, when I first started in this deal, I had, only really been doing seminars for residential real estate offices, and I was not really getting a lot of success from that. And I knew I walked into a commercial real estate office down in Long Beach, and I asked the members, those agents, I said, how many of you have done a 1031 exchange for your customers? And like almost every person raised their hand. And then I realized what I had not been missing. I'd been talking really not to the wrong crowd, but not as targeted rich of environment. So I realized that I had to kind of graduate and start doing exchanges for, or seminars and presentations for these commercial brokers. And then from there, the next step is to go and do attorneys and CPAs, which is a little more intimidating. And, you just kind of constantly are growing, constantly, trying to learn new things, ways that you can help your clients get these transactions completed, because it's my job. My job is to try to do what I can when somebody's in an exchange, if there are complications, to help them through those so they can get to the other side and people can get the transaction completed. It's good for the customers, it's good for the agents. And as far as, continuing to push, I have, a couple guys down in Orange County who formed their own team within my company they're constantly, nipping at my heels, and so I try to be, the number one person in the company, which ends up being the number one person in the country. But because I just strive to be the best. I've always tried to do that. At some point, these kids probably that are down in San Diego and Orange County probably knock me off my throne, but I'll keep running as long as I can and try to stay out in front of it. So I think there was a question in the chat box. I think it said something about, if 1031s are done away with, I think.
So in anticipation, yes, in anticipation of 1031 exchanges going away, what alternatives do you suggest for owners to consider to avoid paying taxes on their investment properties? And did you mention that people may prefer to refinance rather than sell?
Yeah, I think that if 1031 goes away, you're going to have a tougher time as a commercial agent getting clients to sell their properties. I mean, that's just really the bottom line. It's going to be hard to say, hey, sell your deal for $5 million. I know you've got a $3 million gain. I know you're going to pay $1.8 million in taxes. And that's if they don't raise the capital gains tax rate. And if they raise the capital gains tax rate, and this is not a political thing. It's not, I'm not, it's just, they're just different sides of the policies. Some policy, one side of the policy, they, want to, raise taxes and use that money to go pay for other programs. And they look at, people who own real estate as, wealthy individuals who can afford to pay their taxes. And so the reality of it is that for 1031 though, ultimately, if you do away with it, the people that really get hurt the most are not my big customers, right? So like my publicly traded REITs that do deals, these huge transactions, they can afford to pay their taxes. It's really the guys who, like my brother-in-law who owns an automotive shop that basically uses the real estate as his 401k. Well, when he's going to retire, if he wants to sell that shop and put it into something that will, create cash flow to allow him to retire, if he's got to pay taxes, it really is going to hurt him. So there's not any alternatives to 1031 right now. I think, you probably would see clients, if they had built up a lot of equity in their property and they wanted to kind of build their portfolio, they might be in a situation where they refinance the property, use some of their cash from the refinance to go buy new assets. But I just don't think it would be a really harder sell to get people to sell their property. I mean, you're going to always have people that are selling or, they need to sell. And so I think that's a different conversation. But the people that are just selling and trading assets as they do through 1031, they're really going to have to rethink that if 1031 goes away. Now, I think that because the Senate obviously has, remained, Republican, I think that the likelihood that they were able to pass really significant tax reform is probably, probably not very likely. I mean, it was very challenging for them to do it. When the Republicans had all three branches of government back when Trump first got elected, they wrote a tax reform bill and they barely got it passed. And that was where they had majority in the House, the Senate, and they had the president. So it's not something that's very easy to do. Last time it was done before that was 1968. So significant tax reform, not as easy to do.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Greg, I'm with a company called Source Advisors, and we specialize in cost segregation. And, 3 years ago when the tax reform started, we thought that was dead. But when the tax reform came about, it kind of put cost seg on steroids. So my business has grown successfully this year more than ever before.
Yeah.
Some of that is because I cultivated clients and they were able, with that tax deferral, to buy more real estate. So it helped, brokers. And I like to deal with brokers, but have you had clients or CPAs that come to you and talk about, we're doing a 1031, but we want to marry it with cost segregation? Do you have like a preferred provider for that or suggest that?
So we certainly have clients that have cost segregation studies that break the parts of the property out from real estate into personal property. Right. Typically people don't come to me and ask me, hey, do you have somebody that can do a cost segregation study for me? And I think that your business certainly, has grown, and that's great. But I actually think that once the, market cools off at some point, and I don't know when that's going to happen or if it's going to happen, then you get even busier. So I remember in the last cycle, people were doing a lot of cost segregation studies. Right. A lot of my clients were doing it. And so we certainly have clients who are trading who have done cost segregation studies on their properties. So I think that, it's a valuable tool to use for individuals to break that out in their property. But I don't really get a lot of requests for that, on the 1031 side.
Yeah, because it is an alternative. And the nice part is that you can also get bonus depreciation. So right. It's kind of like an interest-free loan from the government, but it's definitely tax avoidance, not tax evasion. Sometimes
correct. Yeah. Yeah,
sense.
I agree.
Greg, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate the question and answers. Thank you for your support of Crew Inland Empire, and thank everyone for joining us. Everyone have a wonderful week. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.